Hello, you're watching TVP World Talks. I'm Michał Kłosowski. 60 years ago, a group of Polish Catholic bishops issued a groundbreaking address to their German counterparts, paving the way for post-war reconciliation between nations marked by the horrors of war. We forgive and ask for forgiveness became a historic message that signaled a new path towards healing of wounds inflicted by Nazi Germany. But how much influence does this message have in the world of today? Joining us now is Michał Kłosowski, Deputy Editor-in-Chief at the Wszystko Co Najważniejsze magazine. Hello and welcome to TVP World.
Hello and thank you very much for having me.
So let's begin with the message itself. How much ahead of its time was it back then?
First of all, it was a sign not only of reconciliation, but a sign of much brighter view, because the letter itself was signed in 1965. So the context of the moment was kind of dramatic. 20 years after the Second World War, the end of Second World War.
So the ruins were still fresh, right?
Exactly. The ruins were still smoking. People remember what had happened those 20 years ago. And in that very exact moment, Polish bishops were able to write a letter in which they're asking for forgiveness. Setting kind of like a sign for a future reconciliation between those two very close, in that sense, nations.
But the Polish authorities, the communist authorities back then, they didn't really welcome this initiative now, did they?
Well, of course, this letter wasn't welcomed with such kind of like optimism. Also, on the other side of the border, even German bishops were a bit distanced from this sign. Mostly because, for many people, it was impossible to imagine that Polish bishops, bishops of the nation, which was destroyed during the Second World War, will be able to write this kind of letter. So, of course, communists also, they were playing the card of nostalgia, and using this card of nostalgia and kind of anger against the Germans within the propaganda to set their policies. So, of course, communists, not only in Warsaw, but also in Moscow, they were furious.
And now, when looking at this from our perspective, we actually have a very interesting quote from the ceremony that took place just yesterday. Archbishop Tadeusz Wojda said, and I quote, "These words were a gesture of prophecy, carrying an immense moral force, a gesture that was ahead of its time and allowed the war-torn nations to embrace the Holy Spirit, thus becoming the foundation of the future European unity." Would you say that perhaps this was the first signal of the times to come, of Europe joining together and essentially eliminating war and violence as a way of solving disputes?
Well, first of all, definitely it was, and still is, a landmark in the European history. Look, 5 years after, in 1970, there was a treaty signed between Germany and Poland to establish the border. So the bishops, Polish bishops, they were able to give a hope for the nations also to build normal relations. Of course, what Archbishop Wojda said yesterday is true, because this letter is a huge landmark in the European history, of course, and it is also a part of our kind of like a gift for the European Union. Because without this letter, without this reconciliation process between Germany and Poland, it would be impossible to build European Union as we know it right now.
But now that we see issues such as the rise of populism, do you think that this process that began back then is threatened in any way by contemporary politics?
Well, what the Church had done in 1965 was far greater than any political sign, because Polish bishops were able to give a new framework for the process of reconciliation. It wasn't founded on politics, on a political level. It was founded on the moral level. And when we would like to see from the point of view of moral issues, the process of reconciliation is not threatened at all. But there is a huge change in the media, the rise of propaganda in social media, disinformation, misinformation coming from East mostly. So, of course, on that level, the process which was started in 1965, it is kind of, it's being kind of changed, let's say.
Now that you mentioned the East, wouldn't you think that also one of the most valuable things that has been gained there is that we essentially had this process of Germany beginning or conducting, this reflection upon its history, a reflection that never happened in Russia, in the USSR and beyond. I mean, looking at Germany today, it doesn't have imperial ambitions that it used to have. Russia, on the other hand, there is no such moral change, apparently.
Well, I'm a historian by education as well, so I need to say that the way, the way how Germany has changed in those half of a century, is marvelous. Okay, it's something which is much greater than we can imagine in here in Warsaw. Obviously, Russia has been established on a very different idea, because after the Second World War, Germany was able to rethink itself, to cut off the imperial part of its history.
Reinvent its identity, right?
Kind of, reinvent the identity. Of course, there is European Union, the agreement between Paris, Berlin and Warsaw, Weimar Triangle, which is a very useful format of diplomacy. And there is no such thing, it cannot be such thing with Russia, with Moscow. Why? Because we do have ongoing war in Ukraine, for example, which is the latest example of Russian imperialism. Russia never done this kind of like a homework with its own identity. It was, it is, and possibly it will be imperial in the future.
Should we be worried that there are some politicians in Germany that seem to be rejecting all those lessons of the last few decades, especially on the extreme fringes of the political scene? Sometimes they say things that would have been unthinkable 10 or 15 years ago.
Well, it's not only in Germany. And there is this populist change going through Europe, but not only Europe, also different parts of the world. And also from that point of view, the letter written by Polish bishops in 1965 and the hand which was, open for our German brothers is something marvelous, because now we are living in the moment of technological revolution. We have social media, we have disinformation, misinformation, and all of that has been used by those who are against European Union, against reconciliation, against peace itself. And obviously there is this kind of change going through Europe, also in Germany, in different countries in Europe, France as well. And also that's why the letter written by Polish bishops in 1965 to their German brothers is something unique in the scale of history, not only Europe, but also the whole history of world.
It is a learning process, though. I mean, one of the arguments which is being advanced here in Central and Eastern Europe is that Germany in particular, under one of the previous administrations, was not really taking certain warnings to heart. I mean, the Nord Stream debacle, right? The fact that many countries in our part of the world were saying, look, this is dangerous, you shouldn't be doing that. Russia wants to use this as a wedge driven into European unity. And yet, Angela Merkel's government chose to proceed with this, saying, this is just economy, it's not politics. Now, of course, it is easy to say, told you so, now that things have happened, right? Especially the war in Ukraine. But what impact does this have on the mutual relations, do you think?
Well, there is this famous book written by Francis Fukuyama, in which he stated that we are living in the moment of the end of history. And I think that the government of Angela Merkel was living in that very exact moment. Because what Polish bishops were able to do when they wrote this letter in 1965, they were able to see, not in like a political cycles or political moments, but with the very, very distant way of seeing the future.
Not in foresight, right?
Yeah, exactly. And one of the problems I would say that our Western friends still do have is a problem with seeing Poland and whole countries of our part of Europe, Central, East European countries, as the partners on the same level. Because for many years there was no Poland on the map, of course. Poland was under communist regime, under the occupation, and giving all this history, it's kind of reasonable for them in Paris and Berlin not to think that Warsaw, Prague, Tallinn, Vilnius, that those people in there do have the same level of knowledge as them. They used to discuss the future of our part of Europe with those who occupied us, with Moscow. And that's the problem. It's not about rewriting the history, it's about rethinking the common memory. And that's what Polish bishops done in 1965. They open hand saying, okay, history is history. Now let's build something together on the same level of partnership.
Do you think that the discussion, which has begun some time ago in Poland concerning war reparations, is this an issue that could undermine these relations? On the one hand, we have political forces saying, well, you owe us 1 trillion euros. On the other hand, you have the German government simply dismissing that completely. Do you think there is a lack of openness there and also a lack of explanation that, all right, many decades after the war, there are also benefits from the European Union, and these, to some extent, will actually mitigate these losses. This argument, however, doesn't seem to appear very often. It's often just, two very fundamental, very principled positions clashing with one another.
Mm-hmm. I'm also a communication expert, and what I can say, it's that what we can see in a brighter level, it's lack of communication between our nations, especially right now, because there is a lot of disinformation and misinformation also on the topic you mentioned. What European Union and Germany done for Poland in those last 3 decades is outstanding. It's outstanding. They helped us a lot. They gave us a hand. They gave us money to rebuild our country from scratch. In 1989, Polish economy was destroyed. Now we are one of the best economies in the world. So obviously, there is a lack of communication, not only between our nations, but also between the academia. Because I would love to see more conferences, more NGOs working together on the level of dialogue between our 2 nations. And I would say that the communication is a key here to understand what had happened lately between Poland and Germany, between those who destroyed our country, and between us being able to open our hearts and our country for those who are helping us right now.
Michał Kłosowski was our guest today here on TVP World. Thank you very much for joining us and for sharing your insight.
Thank you very much.
And I'm Jonasz Rewiński. You're watching TVP World. Please stay with us for more latest news, updates and commentary.